All right. Well, good evening. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everybody for being here. My name is Ashish Kapoor. I am the Senior Energy and Climate Advisor at PEC, and let's go ahead and get started. So, I'm going to start with the energy lay of the land, the big picture in Virginia, and then we'll kind of start drilling down a little bit, power of small scale solar, and we'll talk about the net metering petition by Dominion, and then we as PEC we commissioned a value of solar report, and then we're also involved in the SEC case, so we'll talk about that, and then really think about the public comment aspect and how folks on this call and folks that you share this information with can get involved either through public written comment or an opportunity to actually be part of the hearing itself in January. So for folks that follow PEC's work, this may be familiar territory, but we're dealing with a moment of skyrocketing load demand. We have right now around 23 gigawatts is our peak load. So that's basically what the grid is built for. Doesn't usually get that high, but in that peak summertime where air conditioning is on and data centers are humming, that's that peak load. And then increasingly in winter, there's a peak there as well. So, it's taken 100 plus years to build the grid up in that way. But now in the next 15, 20 years, we're going to see more than a doubling of that peak demand going up to now the latest estimate is 51 gigawatts. So more than a double of how much we have to build as far as energy goes, and in a very short period of time. All the while, we're part of this greater grid called PJM. So that's this interconnected grid going from Illinois all the way to New Jersey, down to North Carolina, and Virginia is wholly part of that PJM grid. So the prices for energy there are hitting record highs. And then the Dominion part of PJM is even higher. And so you can see in the bottom right-hand corner, that means that bills are going up. And we're already seeing that. And recent rate cases show that they're going to continue to go up. And so we're anticipating at least a doubling of our utility bills, if not more. And we'll talk about why that is. But simply put, all the new transmission lines that need to be built, all the new generation plants and peaker plants and gas plants and whatever else that needs to be built, we all pay for that. And so that's why it's that demand in particular that's really creating that increase in electric bills. Now, all at the same time, we have, the clean energy credits at the federal level. Those are going away. As many folks may know, the residential rooftop solar tax credits are going to expire at the end of this year. So that 30% tax credit will be gone, but solar will still remain the fastest and cheapest way to connect any type of energy, despite the absence of those credits. 96% of the new energy added to the U.S. grid was carbon free in 2024. So mainly solar, batteries, and wind. So that number will probably go down. It will go down when we look at the final 2025 numbers, but not as much as one would think, even with the absence of those tax credits. So we have this escalating demand that's unprecedented. We're importing now more energy than the other state. So that could be all types of energy, coal energy, expensive energy, dirty energy. That means more transmission lines across our view sheds, across our landscapes, and all transmission lines that we have to pay for. So just a quick primer on Dominion. Dominion, it serves over 3.7 million customers throughout Virginia. That yellow territory on that map here, that's all Dominion territory. And so, Dominion makes its maximum rate of return off of centralized generation. So building new gas plants, building new peaker plants, any sort of centralized generation, and through transmission lines. So like many investor-owned utilities, that's their primary bread and butter. That's their profit model. And so any other type of generation, such as, and in particular, rooftop energy and things of that sort, smaller scale solar, they don't really have an incentive to encourage that. So things that we agree upon in the Commonwealth, it seems, parking lot solar, dual use agrivoltaics, rooftop solar, solar on, everything from parking lots to Costco roofs, that, has a range of hurdles depending on the size, but that's the simple reason is it doesn't really make them the most money, even if it benefits all of us. So in the first 9 months of this year, Dominion's made 2.4 billion dollars, and beginning on January 1st, 2026, residential customers will have a 7.5% rate increase in their bill. So that's again that's going to be revisited for the following year, but you can expect if you're in Dominion that bill is going to shoot up, and then again over time those bills doubling if not more. So just kind of some back of the napkin math. If you look here, this chart really shows, at the typical increase, that incorporates inflation, electric bills tend to go up 2 to 3% per year. So if your utility bill is $250, after 10 years, you're paying $34,000 for your energy, right? After 20 years, you're paying around 80, and then you're getting up to $140,000 if you're, in that territory or in that home for 30 years. That's at that 3% increase. So you can imagine if that doubles over time, you're effectively looking at, a couple $100,000 worth of energy in 30 years. That solar starts to really look a lot more appealing. That I think a lot of the tension sometimes with rooftop solar adoption comes from, well, when is it going to pay for itself? If you paid for, a bulk of your energy 20 years in advance, I think that would be more of the apples to apples way of looking at it. So really, when you get rooftop solar, you're making an investment. What's your sort of annual return on that investment? Typically, that's 4 to 5%. I think that's sort of the more relevant way to look at it. But in any event, you can save quite a bit with the current model of rooftop solar. And like the last thing to really think about with the future of energy in Virginia is the framework. We have to be 100% renewable energy in Dominion territory by 2045. So that grid that's doubling in size, or now more than doubling, that's that much more clean energy that we need to build. Of that clean energy, 6% of it can be distributed generation. Okay, so what is distributed generation? Well, any sort of energy that you create and use in the same area is distributed generation. So residential rooftop solar, as I mentioned, that commercial rooftop on a storage area or a building or any sort of commercial business, parking lot solar that's being generated and used at the same site, and then agrivoltaics, which is still a new form of energy, but something that we're seeing a little bit more across the country. And we have a PEC project that combines agriculture and distributed energy on the same tract of land. But effectively, the ultimate benefit is you're building either on the built environment or you're not taking agricultural land out of use. So multitude of benefits for distributed generation. Connects energy quickly to the grid. In Virginia now, whether it's a gas plant or whether it's a solar, large scale solar, we're looking at really extended development timelines, 7 to 10 years in many cases, as opposed to smaller scale solar, which you can connect, best case in a couple of months, and even in the worst case, 5-6 months for that connection to happen. So big benefit there, especially when done, cumulatively. Lessens impact to ag lands and forests. So the more we can build on the built environment and dual use solar, that's that much more land, greenfield land that we conserve, prime agricultural land, forested land that's conserved. And that really starts to add up over time. Protection against utility rate increases. So as I showed earlier, as those bills continue to go up over time, mostly because of increasing data center demand and all those additional charges that you and I have to pay on our bills, you're insulated against that when you have rooftop solar or some sort of distributed generation. You'll save more over time as those bills continue to go up. Less loss to transmission inefficiency. So, when you have centralized generation and you're transmitting that across transmission lines, you're typically losing 6 to 7% of that energy. So distributed generation, you're generating it, let's say, on your roof. First and foremost, that energy is being used directly by your home. Anything additional is going out through the distribution lines and feeding into most likely your neighbor's house or somebody down the street. So you're not getting that distribution, you're not getting that transmission line loss. Protection against outages. So some folks I saw in the chat, they've gotten batteries or planning to get batteries. Excellent, because that's going to insulate you against any short-term or long-term outage, blackouts, brownouts. You'll be able to run your home off of that conjunction of solar and battery. If you don't have the battery, your solar system effectively gets shut off, because that extra energy that you're creating needs somewhere to go, and it can't go back into the grid. If folks are working on the grid, then it becomes a safety issue. There's electricity flowing, so your system will automatically shut off. The battery gives that energy an extra place to go, and then you can kind of survive on that feedback loop. Essentially infinitely generating energy, using it, it's going into the battery. You're going off the battery in the evening, and in the kind of the colder months, you have some extra energy to go on. Energy independence, that kind of fits into that general framework. Lessons need for new transmission. So the more that we build a robust distributed grid, that's that much less transmission lines that we have to build. All the sort of environmental impacts that come for that, the view shed impacts, and then the ratepayer impact, because we all pay for that. So less needed for that. And then lastly, it benefits local businesses. Smaller scale generation, everything from kind of community scale to rooftop, it employs around 10 times more people than larger scale energy. So it's good for Virginia business. And I think that's one of the big benefits we'll talk about a little bit later in this presentation. So, and I just briefly want to mention, I mentioned batteries a little bit. This picture shows 2 Tesla Powerwalls, something similar to what we have in the shed at PEC's agrivoltaics project. But great, when you have those, you can back up. If you have them on your home, you can back up whatever your essential functions are, your fridge, your food, your medicines, your medical bed, or whatever that may be, whatever those essential functions are, you can back those up. But then there's an additional benefit. There's something called virtual power plants. So, essentially, let's say everybody on this call has solar plus batteries, and we get to that peak load that I was talking about. That's why utilities build gas peaker plants. So the gas plant might cost $1 billion or $2. It runs 20-30% of the time. Whenever that peak load during that summer, that winter, whatever time when the grid needs that energy, that fires on. And pretty expensive way to generate energy. If you take a little bit of energy from everybody's battery and then you multiply that times 10,000 batteries, 20,000 batteries, you'll get the same amount of energy that you would have gotten from that gas plant. Except instead, it's quicker to build. And then you and I get the benefits, get some kind of bill credit. And, it's kind of a win-win. You're getting the energy independence. You're also contributing. You're part of the energy solution. And that's that much less, new, peaker plants or generation that needs to be built. And it's connected quickly to the grid. And so it's not really a pie in the sky concept. It's something that's already been sort of put into place in a few different states. I think most notably California, and then Texas, folks may remember has had some pretty large scale outages in the last few years during the winter storms. And the virtual power plants have been really effective. They've saved the utility hundreds of millions of dollars, and they've helped keep the lights on and the grid up during those times of stress. So proven to be effective. We did, one of the clean energy bills that did pass earlier this year was a small virtual power plant pilot, 15 megawatts. So nothing huge, prove the proof of concept. It's a start. Even though this is a concept that's already been proven in other utilities, it is something, but definitely something that we can expand and should really expand quickly. So what's the potential of distributed generation? Well, right now, as I mentioned, it's capped at 6% of peak load. That can be much more. That number can be much higher. Virginia right now is at less than 2%. So we're even a long way from that 6%, let alone whatever else is possible, 10, 15%, before you really start getting into, having too much distributed generation. We're a long way from that. And then, these are really, really rough numbers, but there's been some initial research done by Virginia University that found that about half of Virginia's energy you could get from parking lot solar, those parking lot solar canopies. NREL found that you could get about a fourth of Virginia's energy from rooftops if you had all the rooftops covered with solar panels. Uh, Agrivoltaics, so dual use. This is a picture from PEC's farm project. That combination of solar and crops, it could be on a larger scale, solar and grazing, sheep or cattle. You have about 40,000 farms, let's say 39,000 farms in Virginia. If you put a few acres on each one of solar, 1 megawatt each, that's 39 gigawatts. That's more than enough energy for Virginia. So recognizing that that full potential is not possible, but even if you got 10% of each of those, you're talking about, significant portion of energy coming from those sources. So a lot of potential there. And then you add on those batteries, and that efficiency of the solar increases even more, and the potential of all of that increases more. So a lot more potential is available. And the foundational aspect of distributed generation is net metering. So what is net metering? Net metering is, by code, it's something that allows people with solar to get credit on their electric bill for the energy they produce from their system. So like this picture shows, you have solar on your roof. It's converting that solar into energy. Your home is using that. Whatever your home cannot use in that moment, if you have a battery, that goes to the battery, but let's remove the battery. Anything you can't use in that moment, that's going back to the grid. But you're getting full credit for that. So right now in Dominion territory, that's about 14.1 cents per kilowatt hour. So you're getting full credit. So later that evening, obviously there's no sun, you have that bill credit sitting there. That's going to be automatically applied to your bill. So all of that excess energy, depending on your system and your roof location and all that. For me, on my solar, I generate a lot of extra energy in the spring and the fall when I don't have, either the AC or the heating running on full blast. So I get a lot of extra credit at that time. Then that can be used in the summertime and in the winter months. And it's good. It's good for a year. So, for folks that already have solar or looking into it, that your installer is going to ask for your annual electric usage. And then that system will be built to accommodate that usage, recognizing that some months you're going to generate a lot more solar than other months. But when it's all said and done and those credits even out, that's what that system is built for, that annual usage. So that really is the foundation for any distributed generation. We can talk about all the great policies that we can kind of help get into law in the coming years, but a lot of that is irrelevant if you don't have a core policy for net metering that gives you that 1-for-1 credit. And then lastly, it's netted monthly, meaning you may be generating extra energy, today, and then tomorrow you're using it, end of the month, what's your balance? Did you have a net gain of energy that's credited and that rolls over into the next month? And then, like I said, that lasts for a year. So hopefully that makes sense. That's just a sort of definition of net metering and how it exists now. So what is Dominion trying to do? Dominion, this past May, has a petition to decrease the rooftop export rate by a third. And it's tied to a PPA rate. So, it's tied to a rate for larger scale solar, which makes no sense. Those projects benefit from economies of scale. Why would you tie it to that variable number? That's going to be much less. So that's the first part of it. You're cutting it down from that 14.1 cents to about 9.5 cents. And again, that number can change as that PPA rate changes. But the additional wrinkle in that is that they're switching to real-time netting. So every 30 minutes, if let's say it's the middle of the day, you're generating extra energy like we were talking about, every 30 minutes, that meter is going to say, oh, you made extra energy. That's going back to the grid. And you're getting that decreased rate of 9.5 cents per kilowatt hour. So if you had at least a month to kind of have that stuff even out day by day, and then you have that excess amount and that's credited, okay, that's not great. But when you're netting it every 30 minutes, it's those two things working in conjunction with one another that really makes this something that really, really does a lot of damage to the economic viability of rooftop solar. the typical system now is going to take much, much longer to make sense financially. So that's their the prime. There's other parts, but that's the primary part of their petition. And the last thing I'll say is, you know, they're still going to sell your energy at retail. So you're getting less credit for the energy that you're creating. And again, let's think about that bigger picture. We're importing more energy than ever before. Data center demand is through the roof. We need a lot more energy. Distributed generation is the fastest energy to connect. And yet, in spite of all of those sort of historical circumstances, Dominion's trying to cut that rate. And all that, being said, that extra energy that you're creating, Dominion is still selling that to somebody else at full retail rate. So now you're getting less credit, but they're still charging someone down the street 14.1 cents, per kilowatt hour for that energy. So we did a couple of things. One, we commissioned a value of solar study. A value of solar study really looks at, what's the value of this type of energy, distributed generation, and what are the aspects of it that the utility is not looking at, and can we assign value, economic value to those numbers and those benefits? And the purpose of this report, which we'll go over in a little bit, and we'll also share it in the chat. It's on our website. We have some high level, and then we have the actual report, which for folks interested in this is definitely worth looking at. It's meant to be really readable and accessible for folks. That's the way that it was written, and that's the purpose. It's really to inform, folks in Virginia and educate them so that they can engage in public comment. And we'll share that public comment information in a little bit here. The second part of it is we decided to intervene in this case. So we've used this report, and then we're also working with two experts who have provided testimony. Carl Rabago and EQ is an organization. So they've submitted their testimony to the SCC. And the hearing for this case now will begin in January. And then we're intervening in that case with some of our partners that we work on various initiatives with, and that's Solar United Neighbors. They do a lot of great work around distributed generation. Sierra Club, Vote Solar, more policy oriented, also a great organization, and Clean Virginia. So I just kind of quickly read this first page from this Dunsky report, this value of solar study that we commissioned. Kind of sums up what we've already kind of gone over here. But the Commonwealth of Virginia stands at a pivotal moment in its energy transition. Dominion Energy is experiencing unprecedented demand growth, outpacing that of the broader PJM region. This increase is driven primarily by the rapid expansion of data centers, widespread electrification of transportation, and sustained economic development. Further, the Virginia Clean Economy Act, or VCEA, has established ambitious targets, requiring Dominion Energy to deliver electricity from 100% renewable sources by 2045. Achieving this mandate will require diversifying the energy supply by scaling up clean energy resources, retiring fossil fuel generation, and ensuring that the electricity powering the grid remains reliable, affordable, and increasingly clean. Customer-sided solar PV will be central to this transition and alleviate demand constraints by offsetting load directly at customer sites. To ensure solar PV continue playing a growing role in Virginia's energy system, it is critical to develop frameworks that fairly recognize the full range of benefits these resources provide to both the utility and the Commonwealth. At the request of Piedmont Environmental Council, Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors undertook a comprehensive value of solar assessment, and so on. So that's a little dense, but let's kind of unpack that a little bit. So as we said in there, PEC commissioned Dunsky Energy and Climate Advisors to help calculate the actual value of distributed solar generation to every Virginian. So what is Dominion not saying in its analysis, which is basically saying, hey, for folks that don't have solar, they're having to share this burden and pay this cost. By you getting your 1-for-1 credit on your rooftop solar, you're taking advantage of the transmission system and the distribution system and so on and so forth. There's a missing piece to that story. So high level, we found that small scale distributed solar delivers substantial value that far exceeds what is currently acknowledged under Dominion's net billing framework. A fair and comprehensive valuation will help maximize the role distributed solar can play in meeting skyrocketing energy demand affordably, reliably, and equitably. So we really broke this down into two main parts, the value of solar. One is the utility benefits, and then the second is the Commonwealth benefits. So how does distributed generation first, how does it save the utility money and, ergo save us money because we have to pay for the utilities investments? And then second, what are the Commonwealth benefits? What are the varied ways in which it benefits the entire Commonwealth? And what kind of value can we assign there? Okay, so let's start with the utility benefits findings. And this isn't completely comprehensive. The report goes into a little bit more detail, but here we're talking about avoided energy costs. So, fuel costs for gas, natural gas, avoided generation capacity. So less, as we talked about, less generation, less power plants you have to build, ancillary services associated with those plants and transmission lines, reduce line losses, like we talked about, transmission lines and the energy lost when energy goes through transmission lines, risk premiums, lower risk premium, and then demand reduction induced price effect, known as DRIPE. This basically just means, and let's say everybody on this call, we're all generating solar energy. That's decreasing the amount of demand. That peak load amount is going down a little bit. The more people that get it, the more that peak demand goes down. That's that much, less energy that we need from PJM. So that demand goes down. There's more supply available, and the value of energy or the cost of energy goes down. So that's known as DRIPE. But these are all different aspects of benefits to the energy side. There's RECs. So RECs are, I'll just do this real quick because it's really not critical to the overall argument. I also just mentioned some of this stuff gets a little dense. I'm just going over it. I'll do a high level at the end. So get lost in any of this stuff. Don't worry about it. None of it's really critical to understanding kind of the high level arguments that you might make in your public comment. But effectively, utilities have to buy these things called renewable energy certificates. So folks that have solar, you may know about this. You have rooftop solar. Every X amount of energy that you create, every 1 megawatt hour that you create, you get something called a renewable energy certificate. It's not a real certificate, but it's this thing that exists, and you can trade it. And basically, the utility that has to create a certain amount of distributed generation, they can buy it from you. Or let's say, a company that has renewable energy goals, and they want to say, hey, like, we're going to buy ownership of that energy you created. Now we can say we created it. Legally, you can't say that you created it anymore. And that's known as a REC. So if we decrease the amount of energy needed in Dominion territory, then we also decrease the amount of RECs that Dominion has to buy, like their obligation for the Clean Economy Act goes down. So utilities actually saving money on that side if we're generating more distributed generation. That's not reflected in their petition. So all of that, Dunsky found that's you can see in this chart here. That's worth right now about 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So even higher than the current 14.1 cents that were credited in Dominion territory. A lot of that is this darker blue generation. Small portion of that is T&D, that's transmission and distribution. And then this turquoise part is the RECs, like I talked about, the renewable energy certificates. So all of that brings us to 16 cents per kilowatt hour. So that's the utility benefits. Now let's jump over to I'm sorry, I forgot to change this up here, but this should say Commonwealth benefits up here at the top. So pollution reduction, economic benefits, land use impacts are the main Commonwealth benefits. So Customer-sided solar reduces harmful air pollutant emissions. So the more that we get of this, the less NOx, the less SOx, the less particulate matter floating in the air, the less related health impacts and the health costs. As I mentioned earlier, a big portion of the benefit is its benefits to the economy. So that means, local job and economic benefits. And this was calculated through the Department of Energy's National Renewable Energy Lab, NREL. And they have an economic and jobs model that found that the majority you can see on the right, that's the majority of this benefit is coming from that. And then land use impact. So there's a lot of ways to calculate this, but basically, if we build a bunch of solar on the built environment, build a bunch of parking lot solar, build a bunch of agrivoltaics and rooftop solar, that's a lot of land that is saved, prime agricultural land, farming land, forested land, that's saved from larger scale solar development. Without getting too into the details, there are some values that have been assigned to that through some legislation, HB 206 for larger scale solar. But effectively, we use some of those numbers to figure out what that value saved and what kind of value can we assign to those conservation benefits and those agricultural benefits. So all of that added up, we get 24 cents per kilowatt hour of Commonwealth benefits. So all combined, you got the 16 cents for utility benefits, transmission, distribution, RECs. You have 24 cents per kilowatt hour of Commonwealth benefits, economic development and land use. And so 16 plus 24, we get 40 cents per kilowatt hour, way higher than the current 14.1 cents. And of course, more than 4 times as high as the 9.5 cents that Dominion's proposing. We add storage to that value analysis, that takes us up to 45 cents per kilowatt hour. And now, there's also qualitative benefits. So benefits that we can't really ascribe value to. Energy security. The more of our own energy we're using, the less that we're importing, the less dependent, we are upon natural gas and, sort of geopolitics. We've seen how that war and disruptions can affect the cost of fuel. We're insulated from that. Resilience, grid goes down. Can we ascribe a value to you being able to kind of charge your phone or, use a CPAP machine? You can't really assign a value to that, but that's a tremendous benefit of having solar and batteries. Energy independence, decarbonization goals, asset value enhancement. So that basically means you get solar on your home. According to a recent study by Zillow, that increases your home value by about 4.1%. That number might be a little bit higher now as energy costs continue to go up. That's not calculated in Dominion's petition, of course, but for you or I, that is a real benefit in terms of resale value and the value of our property. So last slide here, high level, as I promised, from high level NEM. NEM means net metering takeaways, and then we'll talk about the public comment opportunity. So you have a robust distributed generation system, and you have the foundational aspect of that being net metering, a one-to-one credit. That's getting you energy independence. That's giving you land conservation benefits. You're quickly connecting energy when, and where we need it most. So when, which is now, yesterday, really, Virginia needs more energy. And where by creating it and using it at the same site, you're getting all those other benefits, transmission benefits, decreasing that peak load, and all of those other things. Supporting Virginia's businesses, you're empowering resilience and virtual power plants, protecting us from escalating utility bills. And then lastly, it's the foundation for further distributed generation legislation. So, I work in that space as well with a lot of our partners, and we've had some great bills for distributed generation in the last session. Some of those we're going to run back this year. There's some other legislation. So I'll mention that in the Q&A if we have time. But that's just another great benefit. by having that foundational value, we can jump off and do these other great things. For this form of energy, just once again worth noting, most people agree upon. Sometimes large scale solar that can be a contentious space, and we see that in Virginia in different spaces. Solar on rooftops, I mean, that's something everybody agrees with. Why not put more solar on canopy? We ran some legislation on parking lot solar a couple of years ago, and it was incredible how many people agreed with it, and the ways in which the farming community and the conservation community came out to support it. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to take advantage of what we're agreeing upon. Now, on the right side, this is for folks that have joined, and again for folks that are seeing this after the fact, or anyone that you want to share this with. There's two great opportunities here. So we have the case going on where the SCC is going to look at Dominion's petition. They're going to look at the petitions from the interveners, and that includes PEC and SELC and Solar United Neighbors, and even a lot of different towns, Loudoun County, and I believe Arlington, and some other localities and towns have intervened in this case. So, we're all making our different counter arguments to Dominion's petition, and so there's an opportunity for you all to also submit your own written public comment on the SCC's web form, and Marco will drop that link in the chat. That's something you could do after this webinar. You could do, sometime over the holidays. That's due by January 13th. And that's just a web form in which you put in your information and you put your own story. I think the more personal it is, the more you intertwine, what we talked about today with your own personal experience. Maybe you already have solar and you're not, worried about it. You feel you'll be grandfathered in, but you still feel, well, we have a duty in the Commonwealth. I want other people to be able to take advantage of solar in the way that I did. Whatever your story is, the more you can make it personal, I think the more compelling that is to the staff at the SCC. So that's one option, is that written public comment, and then the other option, and or you could do both, is to register to be called on the day of the public hearing, which is going to be around 10 a.m. or sometime after on January 20th. And then you don't have to be in Richmond. You don't have to be at the SCC. They'll call you, they'll call your phone, and you have an opportunity to give verbal testimony at that time. And Marco will just share a link for that as well in the chat. You do have to register by the 13th for that. And then there's a number there too that you can call to register for that public testimony aspect. So I will go ahead and stop there. And yeah, please tell your friends, family, and neighbors. The more comments they get, I really hope that we can really flood their inbox with a lot of different stories. So thank you very much, and we can open it up for some questions.